when we're talking about bidding, there's a whole process to it. And, typically a contractor is doing a competitive bid. Sometimes you're just asked to, do a bid. Somebody is interested in working with you and just wants to know what it's going to cost. But usually it's competitive. And, I do residential design work, and folks ask me, well, how many bids should I get? And I recommend at least 2, if not 3. And the way that works is you've got to have some plans, right? At least to the point where someone can make a pretty good bid package. For anything that's non-private, it's required that you do the competitive bidding process. And why would that be? Chris Raddick, why are competitive bids required on public projects, do you think?
I think it's probably required to keep kind of a level playing field so no one has a monopoly on it. It also gives,
Okay.
the little guy a chance.
Okay. Anybody want to add to that?
So the public is guaranteed to get the best price, and that there's no
Yeah.
People hiring their friends to do big projects and stuff.
Yeah. So I think all 3 of those are very good answers, but definitely you want to make sure with public money that you're getting the best price. So it's required. And then in order to bid, not only do you need some drawings, but there's a package that you'll be reviewing as a bidder. So some of the things in the bid package that are going to be needed are the drawings and the specs. And if it's like a public project and you're doing a competitive bid, then the drawings and the specifications should be finished, 99% at least. Because with a competitive bid, especially if you're looking for the low bidder, a few $1,000s can make a difference, right? $10,000 difference could really throw you out of the competition. So it's only fair that you have all the information you need to make a really good bid. And so it takes some time to really review the drawings, be very familiar with the project and think through the process. And then also reviewing the specifications, because like I mentioned last week, not everything that's required on the job is really called out on the plans. It's almost impossible to get everything on there. So for instance, finishes, what kind of flooring, maybe even what kind of doors, what quality of hardware are you looking for. So that's the kind of stuff that you find in the specifications that can't really be put on the drawings. And then for a competitive bid, you're also going to have some instructions from the owner on how you want the bid submitted, time, there'll be a deadline for the bids, and then what should be in the bid package. So that is something that needs to be really carefully reviewed. And there will be something in writing to tell you what the contractual obligations will be. So contractual obligations might be whether or not a project has to have Davis-Bacon wages. So I'm going to stop there and see if anybody knows what that means.
All public works are Davis-Bacon, aren't they? It's prevailing wage requirement that
yeah, set by the feds. Yeah. what's interesting is the feds or the state. So depending on where the money's coming from, the state of Alaska actually has a higher prevailing wage than the feds. So you've got to know where the money's coming from. So with a public project, if it's federally funded and they're requiring Davis-Bacon wages, you might actually be paying less than if the money was coming from the state because their prevailing wages are higher.
I did not
And
know.
in general, yeah, I just learned that recently. And in general, the Davis-Bacon wages are higher than the rate that you would normally pay for your carpenters and laborers. So that's a really important thing and that would be inside the contractual obligations that you definitely need to be aware of when you're bidding. Because if you're bidding your guys out at $45 an hour for labor, but prevailing wages are 50, you have to pay them 50. So you got to know that up front. And then there'll usually be qualifying questions. Questions like, have you done a project like this before? How many folks are in your crew? Insurance, what kind of insurance do you carry? Are you bondable? You know, how much bonding can you get? So there'll be questions like that. And then almost always on a competitive bid, you need to list references. And that can be from prior projects, it could be from lenders, it could be from subcontractors that you've worked with. And it could be from architects or engineers as well. So that's something that, you know, as you're starting out in the business, to start to develop that list for yourself of projects that you've done that you can feel comfortable using as a reference down the road. And you know, sometimes, you know, it's been a while since you've done a particular kind of project, but if you've got a list of those projects and who you work for, people, you know, if they're happy with your work, they're happy to give you a reference, even if it's been 5 or 10 years. So these are some questions for you all. Who completes the bid package? So think about that. You've got
The architect.
a project, talked about that. And then now, who puts this all together?
Isn't it the
Were there, oh, go ahead, Kylie.
isn't it the owner
Owner and
and the architect?
yeah, good. Yeah, they usually work on that together. Who solicits the bid?
The owner.
Yeah, same folks. So soliciting the bid means advertising it. So if it's a public project, of course, there are requirements again that it go out in a public notice. So newspapers, and then usually there's a time frame that it has to be advertised. And so that's the owner's responsibility. And then what is the contractor's process? That's kind of a weird question. What do I mean by that? So in other words, you as the contractor have seen an advertisement and you're interested. What do you do next?
So you have to get the drawings, specifications. You have to get together references. What else? Anything else that's required for presenting the bid.
Okay. Yep. So that's kind of the big picture. So you got the drawings and the specs, and then what do you do with them?
You
How do you
read
create?
them,
Yeah.
you read them to make an estimate on how much everything will cost overall.
Good, yeah.
First to see if it's even worth bidding. If it's, first stop is if it's worth it to the contractor to even bid it.
Well, that's a good point. Yes. Yeah, review it, see, well, and see if you qualify too, right? You might really want the job, but you don't have the qualifications, or you can't get the crew together. And then to follow up on what Kylie was saying about the estimate, so the estimate is the value of work, but then you also need to do a schedule to make sure you value the labor. So that's time and hourly rates for your different crew and subs, rental, equipment rental, and that sort of thing. And then who decides the winning bid? Without a question mark.
The owner?
Yeah. And usually the owner and the architect, or if they have a project manager, yep, they sit down and review everything that they got from the qualified bidders. First of all, they decide if the bidders are qualified. And then if they are, then they start to dig into the bids. And then they decide, yes. So what's the process for awarding the bid?
Starts with the bid opening that is actually the closing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. So there's the bid opening, everybody shows up who's bid to see how it went. And then, you know, especially if it's a public project like that, people want to know, you know, how close were they? Because the final amount is publicized, not the details, but you know, this is the winning bid. Yeah, it's a public process. And then if it's a private process, it's really just a matter of the owner hopefully calling everyone and saying, hey, thank you for your bid. We chose to go with someone else. And then calling the winning bidder and say, okay, let's sit down and work out the contract. So let's just kind of go through what we kind of highlighted and go a little bit deeper. So the architect provides all the bid documents. So they need to be very careful that they're making sure that everything that they want the contractors to respond to is in the bid package. So can you guys name what's in the bid package? I know you can get the first one, the instructions. What else?
Required qualifications one.
Yeah, good. So in the book, they just call it the bidder's questionnaire, and that's exactly what it is. What are your qualifications? So the other thing is the bid package has to talk about bonding requirements. So anybody want to elaborate a little bit on bonding? How does that work?
So the way I understood it was it's money that the contractor has tied up. So if something goes wrong, it protects the owner.
That's correct, yes. And there's different ways to get bonding, but there are companies that's what they specialize in. You know, you call them up, you say, I got this big project, and it's requiring a $2 million bond. And so you're putting your money in escrow, and you're not putting in $2 million, but you're it's sort of like bail, right? You're paying a certain percentage to this company, and they're really the ones who hold the big $2 million, right? But you're paying for that. And so the state of Alaska requires every contractor to have a bond, whether they're using it or not. It's just, it has to be on record that you have at least $1 million worth of liability. That's insurance, sorry. You need to have liability insurance, which I think is the next bullet. No. Anyway, and then you have to have a bond up to, I believe it's $20,000.
And I imagine getting a surety company to kind of go with you is kind of a challenge of being an entry-level general contractor.
Yes and no. We have some local insurance companies, Shattuck and Grummet, who write contractors insurance and bonding. Oh no, they don't do bonding, but they do the liability insurance, and they're fairly reasonable, and they don't ask a lot. The longer you're in business, the easier it is to get bonds. So in other words, you have to build up equity in your company with equipment and something that a bonding agency can take from you if you fail. So there's money in the bank, there's your equipment, that sort of stuff. And then the size of the projects that you've completed, all that stuff over time makes you more eligible for more bonding for bigger projects. So as starting out, you're not going to get a big bond at first, because bonds are one of those things too that it's trust, right? You're building up trust as you complete projects, and you're not, no one's asking for the bond. Did that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
In the bid package, there'll be some kind of an agreement. It won't be filled in, but you'll have an idea of what kind of a contract agreement you're going to be signing. So one of the ones that's commonly used throughout the country actually is American Institute of Architects agreements, and they cover all kinds of projects. And so a lot of contractors will use those, especially on big projects, because they're agreements that have been, they're templates basically that have been used on many projects. And so they have also been to courts, to see that they are legitimate agreements. So you'll often see the AIA blank agreements, and then sometimes the general conditions come right from the American Institute of Architects. They produce a lot of these bid documents for construction. You don't have to use them. You can find these blank agreements and general conditions other ways. You can just write one up, but generally when you're talking about a public project, it's probably going to be an AIA document and general conditions. And so the general conditions will be sort of a template for any job. It's just sort of like, you will do the work that's required within the contract, in a timely manner, blah, blah, blah. So it's pretty generic and pretty usable on multiple projects. But where it gets really specific, of course, is with the construction drawing and specifications. Those are going to be unique for every single job. Most of this the other stuff above here is sort of almost boilerplate in that once you've done a few of these projects, you start to see, oh, wait, they're using the same questionnaire, the same bonding requirements, the same agreements as last time we bid on a public project. So for the contractor to really do a good bid, it's a lot of work. And so I think, as Robert mentioned early, one thing you want to do when you see something advertised is to really look at it and see, is this going to be worth the effort I have to put in to do a really complete, accurate, and competitive bid? Because that's going to take time, especially the more complex the project is. If it's a home and you've done, houses similar to the one that you're going to bid on, it's not as much work, but it's still a lot of work. It's still going to take you hours, and it's a gamble, right? You can put in, a 40-hour bid. It takes you 40 hours to like do a really good, accurate bid and then not get the job. Well, you can't charge anybody for that. That's just your overhead. So you want to make sure that you're bidding on stuff that you think you're going to get and that you're qualified for, and that you have time to do. And you got to take the time to do it accurately, because you don't want to win a job and then look at your bid and go, oh, shoot, I forgot something major, because it's late. So what would be the advantage of doing a site visit? Why would you do a site visit before, as part of the bid process?
To get a feel for the project, if you need any certain type of equipment, if you need to dig out some ground or add grade to it. Anything else?
Also, a good reason
Yep.
to visit a site is to try to see if you can predict any unforeseen issues. So for
Yeah.
example, I was on a job where they gave us X amount of hours to set up temp barriers because we're working in a medical clinic here in Juneau. And they did not look in the ceiling to see how many penetrations we would have to put sheetrock around. And we didn't come anywhere near the hours that we allotted for it because it just took too much time trying to get around all those penetrations. If they would have visited the site,
Really?
opened up
That
the
really-
ceiling, just lifting up the ceiling to look, they could have gotten a better bid on that portion of the project.
Yep, really good point. It's nice to be able to learn from someone's mistake when you're not the contractor. Things you put down in your notebook and say, okay, I don't want this to happen to me. Yeah, so especially with remodels, my goodness, there are so many unforeseen things, and you're not gonna find them all, but that was a really good example. Pop up the acoustic ceiling and stick your head up there and see what's going on. If you can, especially, on remodels for homes, do a little invasive look into the walls to see, like, just want to replace the windows, but it turns out all of the studs around the windows are rotten and you didn't predict that.
So I did have a question about
That's
that.
what-
Kylie and I have worked on a roof where we were going to replace the roof, and then we found out the top plates and some parts of the studs were rotten, so it wasn't part of the
Yeah.
deal. So how would you go about bringing it up to the owner for something like that, where it's going to take more work? Otherwise, the rot will just transfer to what you're putting up there, but it's not within the scope that you agreed upon.
Well, that's when you stop and take pictures and figure out what you think it's going to take, and then go to the owner right away and say, this was unforeseen. These are the things that we need to do to make this job correct. And, you know, most owners, you bring it to their attention early and let them know before you do the work, and even show them, you know, that's why the pictures can be handy. You know, they should understand and agree. But then you have to generally estimate that work, right? So that's additional work. So then you really gotta do as much exploration as you can to make sure that when you do say this is going to be an extra 10,000, that that's going to cover it, your materials and labor.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
The formally, if it's before the bid opening, you could file an addendum to the bid. Or if it's once you're started the work, you know, officially you would file a change order. I don't know if it's the same in residential. I would guess on larger scale developments and whatnot, it would be, but yeah, change orders happen all the time. Addendums to bids happen all the time. There's always stuff like that, especially on remodels.
Yeah. That's a really good point, Robert, is there are official ways to handle it. And you just brought up two really good documents. And the reason for the documents and using official documents is then it becomes part of the contract too. So you can always point and say, you know, here we wrote up the change order. Change orders require, go ahead, Robert, talk about that a little bit. What do you put in a change order?
I'm sorry, I'm having some commotion at my house. I didn't hear that.
Oh, okay. I was wondering if you wanted to explain what you would find in a change order. What would you put in a change order?
Usually it would be something like a material, if there was a unavailability of some material in an addendum, you know, as you were reviewing a bid and a material had become obsolete or something like that. You would go back to the architect and file an addendum and say, well, we can't get a product that meets this specification or whatever, or, you know, the job can't be done this way. So we're going to have to, and it could cost more or less money. A change order is just like you were talking about. You know, you get into a job and there's always, or not always, but a lot of times there's unforeseen things that come up. We deal a lot with AEL&P. We do a lot of AEL&P work, and they're real easy to deal with. Like, you don't have to do anything official with AEL&P and file addendums and things like that. But on public works jobs, you definitely do. Anything public works. I'm sorry. Hold on just a sec.
Oh, okay, that's fine, Robert. I'll take it from here. So the change order becomes part of the official document, and it's all kept in the records so that at the end of the job, because in the example of a public works, maybe the project was, say, $2.5 million, but it really cost, you know, $2,750,000. Well, the public's going to want to say, hey, where'd that extra $250,000 go? And then you've got a record of these change orders. And so the way the change order works with public works is whoever wants to make the change, say it's the contractor, they will write it up and send it to the architect, when the architect will talk to the owner and will approve it. And so then there's a record that it was requested and it was approved. And in that, there's the language of what's changed and what the price is. And as Robert mentioned, sometimes there are actually deducts, you know, so we decided that we really didn't need this, I don't know what, and so we're going to take it out. We're not going to supply it, but we need to tell you in writing why we're not doing it. and why that's coming out of the cost. So it's a very formal way of recording all of that. On a residential project, it can be a little bit less complicated, but as I was mentioning before, you need to have in writing the change that you anticipate. So for example, the roof, the thing that you found where there was rot, and you want to do the right thing, but you need to have kind of an official record of what you found and how much it's going to cost, and then get the owner's approval. Because as nice as people might appear, when it comes to paying the bills, it's better to have stuff in writing. And sometimes it feels a little bit awkward, but it's better for everyone if it's in writing. Maybe that was more information than you wanted.
No, that was perfect because Kylie and I, sometimes we do jobs, and that's always, ever since that roof, that's always in the back of our minds, is how do we approach that? And now we
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. No, it's good to have everything in writing. So before the bid is complete in the bid process, there may be a pre-meeting. Definitely go to those because that's a chance to usually meet with the owner and the architect to go over things, and that's when the contractor can start bringing up things like, hey, on the plans it shows that you want that it's going to be a concrete slab that is stained, but in the specifications it says concrete with linoleum. So we need to clarify that. We want to make sure that we're bidding on the right thing. So the pre-meeting is a helpful place to kind of work out some of those questions or instances where things aren't quite right on the plans or specs, or ask questions about, is there going to be any schedule limitations? For instance, are we going to have to close down over Christmas? Are we going to have to close down during Hanukkah? Just that's the kind of stuff you need to know. And that kind of stuff can come up during pre-bid meetings. So what's a responsive bid? So you've put together your package and sent it in, and you're waiting for the call, right? How do you know you have a responsive bid? Or as the owner, how would I decide whether your bid was responsive?
A responsive bid is when the contractor provides all of the bidding requirements.
Good.
And
Yeah.
it's on time.
Yes, definitely. Experience is another thing. You can't BS that one. Sometimes, some projects that I've worked on, the contractor of record may not have all of the qualifying experience, but they'll bring on a partner who does. And that's legit. Because what that does is it allows you to bid on something that you want, and gives you that experience for the next time as well. But you got to be upfront about that. You got to include that other contractor because they're going to help you get qualified for that project. So how does the contractor go about finding a project?
I think if you're a contractor here in Ketchikan and you're good, you won't have any issues finding work, just word of mouth.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one in Juneau.
Press releases, the bid announcements.
Yeah. So I was mentioning that all public projects have to publicize in the newspaper or some other means. And so keeping an eye on that's really important. Sometimes you can just find out what's coming up by also going to the plan room, going to the CBA and just looking, oh, here are the permits that are out there. I wonder who's bidding on those, and keep your eye on, especially if you're interested in moving into the commercial side of things, see what commercial projects are getting permits. So yeah, reputation, building department. So how do you select a project? So Ketchikan, Chris, if you are a contractor and someone calls you up and says, hey, I've got plans ready, I'm interested in having you build a house, do you take everyone? That's just a
No,
rhetorical. Yeah,
no.
why not?
Yeah, there's number of reasons, timing, depending on what else you have going on. If it's something you're comfortable doing. I mean, there's a couple things off the top of my head.
Yeah. Another thing you just keep in mind, small towns, the reputation can flip the other way too. There are certain owners, certain people who have projects you don't want to work for, right? They're just not people you're going to get along with. And it's if you're building a house for somebody, that can be a pretty long process. So you've got to make sure that there's someone that you're interested in. So based on past experience, yep. The other thing is having good construction documents really can help. Someone comes to you and they've got a project, a house, and they've just drawn it up on some graph paper. You might be a little bit nervous about giving them a really good estimate based on some sketches. So having good documents is really helpful because then there's no question about what's wanted. There's no surprises down the road. So drawings and then specifications really are not required and very rarely written on a residential construction, but a good set of plans that shows how, what the expectation is for the foundation, the floor framing, the general layout of the floor plan is really crucial. And then elevations showing the intent, is it going to be a steep roof or a flat roof, that sort of thing. Yeah, and I think, Chris, this is what you mentioned. This isn't necessarily time, but there might be a project that comes up and you know that you can't take it because the plumber that you always work with is not available at that time. So you got to have a team together, or all the guys that you normally pull together for a job are out working for somebody else right now. So type of contract, well, if it's a simple house and it's like a 14-page contract, it might make you nervous. Or not, but you want to read and see if it's going to favor you or the owner, or if it's going to be sort of a contract that is protecting both of you.
Can you repeat that? You sound kind of choppy.
Oh, okay. So a contract needs to protect both the owner and the contractor. So you want to read through it and make sure that that there isn't any language in there that favors the owner. And the other thing I was saying, Kylie, is that if it's a simple house and the contract is 14, 15 pages long, that might make you nervous. It's like, is this person like really suspicious? Have they had a really bad experience, or what? That's just my take on complicated contracts. if it's a commercial job, you want a contract that's pretty in-depth. So you know when payments are going to be made. You want to know what happens if the owner doesn't deliver or you don't deliver. So commercial projects should have fairly complex contracts. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And what about location? Why would that matter?
Because if you take a job where, say you're working out of Juneau and then you have a job, let's say in Hoona, you're gonna either have to take your crew over there and pay for housing and board and all that stuff. And if it's a union job or a city job, you might have to also pay per diem, which is a lot more expensive. Or you can try to hire a crew locally over there, but then you're taking a risk of hiring people that you have no idea how reliable they are, if they're, I know that when I went and did it, I worked on a job in Hoona and it was hard to find people who weren't always on drugs or sober. So, I mean,
Yeah.
problems like that, it could really increase your costs. But if you have a good plan or if your company's big enough to be able to afford all that, then it's not such a big issue.
No,
Not
but
just
that's a
Hoona
great
that-
point. Robert, were you going to add something?
No, I was just saying it's not just Hoona that has that problem, but do you work on the dock over there, Chris? Sorry.
It was the ACC job. Part of it was the dock, but they're also building like a little area for tourists to expand their tourism.
Gotcha.
They have a gondola that's going all the way up the hill to the zip line. So it goes from ground level all the way up. That way they don't have to drive the buses up the hill as often.
Gotcha. Same project as the dock, so
Yeah.
gotcha.
That was a big multi-year project, wasn't it?
Yeah, and for ACC, it was a good project because it was just time and materials. So
Oh,
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. So it was different because the sense of urgency isn't the same as if you have a bid with a tight time schedule. And I've worked on jobs like that too, but
Yeah.
it was just a whole different beast being time and materials.
Yeah, that's great. Those are the best jobs for contractors, I think. Another issue with location, you guys have talked about, the out of town stuff, but also sometimes location would be, if you think about Juneau, if you had a project out the road and it was down one of those embankments, that could really jack up the price, right? How do you stage things to start pile driving and getting the platform so that you can actually work on level ground? That here, there's just so little flat ground left that you've got to really know the site and how you're gonna stage your equipment and your materials. And then, of course, this was the first thing that someone said is the time frame. So you've got to make sure it fits your schedule. You don't want to necessarily start a brand new project that means excavating soils in October. That could be kind of an awful time to start a big project, but sometimes you get lucky. And then, as Chris R. was saying, if you're working on a project that's time and materials, the time frame isn't as crucial, right? You aren't worrying about the crew lagging behind. You just get paid for the time you're on the job, and as long as you're producing, the owners are happy and you're happy. So we've been at it for almost 40 minutes. I'm going to give you guys, oh wait, no, like more like an hour. So I'm going to give you guys a little break, and I'm going to grab some tea. Actually, let's go one more slide on this part of the presentation tonight. Oh, right. And then the other part of selecting a project is the local economy. So what does that have to do with anything?
There's times that, you know, there's everybody's building, and then there's times where there's not that much building going on. And so if business is coming in left and right, and you're getting, you know, people wanting bids everywhere, then you're going to price accordingly. And if this is the first bid you've had in a long time, you're going to price accordingly too.
Very good. Yeah. Yeah. You gotta know what's happening out there and kind of what the market's going to allow. So that's great. So last slide, as I said before we take a break. So some of the things the contractor needs in order to qualify for a job, you've got to be able to bond. And for bonding, you need capacity. So do you have a crew? Do you have some capital? And you know, capital can be cash, but it can also be your assets. So your equipment, you know, your trucks, maybe, you know, you've got some earth moving equipment, or you just have a bunch of tools and stuff like that. All that is capital. And then of course, the character part, that comes in with your references. And so when you're going to a bonding agent, they're gonna want to know what kind of person are you? Are you trustworthy? Are you gonna walk off with, you know, your first payment and find you down in Mexico? So bonding, like I said, kind of can grow with your business, and the more character that you're building, the more references that you have, and the more capital you have, the easier it is to qualify for more and more bonding. Each time you fulfill an obligation, that's going to increase your bond rating, and that's talked about in the book. So it's kind of like your credit rating, right? If you use your credit card wisely and you make your payments and your car payments and all that stuff, suddenly you're able to borrow more money. And bonding's pretty much the same thing. It's not really borrowing the money, but it's putting money in escrow. So, like I said, that's the last slide for this part of the presentation. There's more to come, but I want to take a break. Well, let's get started. So, of course, the estimates come from the plans and the specifications. The construction documents is a fancy term for the really good set of drawings, complete set of drawings. The specifications, of course, we talked about, we'll talk not about quantity, but about quality and specific ways that things need to be installed. That kind of stuff's found in the specifications. So permits, of course, are one of those things that's negotiable. You either have the owner get the permit, or you as a contractor will get the permit. And so if you're the one who's responsible for that, you've got to find out what the price of the permits are going to be, because as we talked earlier, a simple building permit is easy to calculate. It's going to take you an hour or so to submit the plans for review, and you're going to know the amount immediately. That's easy to figure into your estimate. If you have to do conditional or allowable use permits, the price of the permit is set. Those are set fees, but the time to go through that process is a little bit less knowable. And so it's really important to know if you're going to need extra permits. And then inspections are not, there's really no dollar value, except that you need to know when to have those inspections done, and that can affect, so that would be considered a milestone in your project, and you need to know when those are going to happen to make sure they get done so that you don't delay the process for the next step. So a good example of that is you have to have the rebar inspected before you can pour the concrete. And so that kind of stuff isn't necessarily in your estimate as a dollar value. It would definitely be in your planning document, though, in your schedule with meeting those milestones, and then also reviewing to make sure that you're not missing inspections. Or, well, I'm back. Sorry about that, you guys. I think I need to make a trip out to IT and say this just doesn't work. So the plan now, since I don't know if I'm going to get booted off again, is I want to focus on what we're going to be doing for assignment 1. So in the syllabus, there's it says estimate the cubic yards of soil removed and fill. Upload as assignment 1. So the question is, what do you want to know about that? And we could go back to video if you want. I'm not going to try to show a PowerPoint right now.
I'm sorry, you said estimate yards of,
Yeah, estimate cubic yards of soil removed and fill.
okay.
So
Is this for like a footing, foundation, slab?
good questions, Robert. So the plans that I uploaded into, let's see, they're in the second week folder. So in the second week, I said study the house build plans. So those plans are in the folder for week 2. Okay. Has anybody looked at them yet? Robert has.
I have briefly.
Okay, so you know where they are.
Yeah.
Chris, have you found them? Chris B.
I'm sorry.
I want to make sure that you know where the plans are.
Yep, I found them.
Okay, cool. So how do we go about figuring out how many cubic yards of soil to remove? Thoughts on that? What's a cubic yard?
One yard by 1 yard by 1 yard.
Yeah, so think of just cube, that's 2-dimensional. So how far do we have to excavate typically to get to frost depth? Let's just go with that thought right there. So what's frost depth in Southeast?
Is it 4 feet in Southeast?
It's a good guess, but no.
3 feet.
I know it was 6.
No, it's
6
32 inches, but 3 feet for estimating purposes is a lot easier. Because guess what? That's part of a cubic yard, right? So what is a cubic yard? What is it? A yard?
3 feet.
Yeah, 3 by 3 by 3. So when you're doing estimating for how much excavating you're going to do, if so, what I'm going to allow you to assume is that we've got all the overburden off, right? We're not going to worry about, oh, is there 1 foot or 2 foot of junk? But we're going to assume that you're going to dig a hole that's 3 feet deep. But the question is, are you going to, how big is the hole going to be? So where does that information come from?
The plans.
Yeah. What specifically? What plan?
The floor plan.
Not really.
The foundation plan.
Yep. Because the footing is wider than the building. So on a 1-story, which is the plan that you guys are looking at, how much does the footing stick out beyond the wall all the way around? Anybody? Maybe if I get lucky, I'm going to bring up the plans and we'll look at them together. So I'm going to try that. Hopefully I don't crash my computer again. I can still hear it whirling in the background. That doesn't give me a very solid feeling. Okay, dare I share my screen? I will give it a whirl. Here we go. I'm going to put it over on 1. Okay, so if I close that and close this, we can see a little bit better. Okay, so this, can you guys see the foundation plan?
Yes.
Okay, so this is in week 2's folder, and you guys all said you found it. So you'll notice that the back here has 24 feet of width, and that's the same as on the floor plan. But what you'll notice is there's a dash line on each side. So that means that the footing is sticking out beyond the edge of the house. And so we can either look at another drawing, which would be the details. And I'll scroll in a little bit more. So here is the line of the house. So this is the exterior line. And Chris Baldwin, I was talking about kind of the way that we're doing things a little differently. We've got the foam on the outside. So this double line right here, that's the sheathing. It comes down. This is the rim joist, the mud sill, and this is the concrete wall. We're using the insulated concrete forms. So it's insulated all the way to the exterior line. So that, look at the foundation plan.
Robin, I can't hear you at all. It's choppy again.
Oh, poop. Okay. Stop the video. Is that any better, Kylie?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. So this line here is the, if we're looking down on the foundation plan, that point right there is the outside line that's solid. This right here, that point is the dashed line. So the footing is 12 inches. The stem wall is 6, and it's evenly spaced. So that means that this sticks out 3 inches on each side of the concrete. So if I go minimize that and bring the other one back up and zoom in a little bit, you can see that dark line is the edge of the building, the edge of the stem wall, and this dash line is the footing. So it sticks out 3 inches on all 4 sides. Make sense, you guys?
Yes.
Okay. So that kind of gives you an idea of the basic size. And then the other thing to pay attention to is there's a bit of a deck right here. So anything that's attached to the house, the footings for this deck also have to go down 32 inches. So if you're thinking about working on this foundation, you don't want to excavate a hole that's just barely big enough for the footings, right? Because you got to walk around and place the boards. Well, you got to set up the what they're called bat boards that allow you to do string lines to get the whole thing square. So you need a little bit of room for that. And then as you form the footings, you're going to have wood on each side here. So you want to have room. So excavating is going to be bringing the dirt back and down. So when you're figuring out how many cubic yards of material you need, it's not going to just be the footprint of the foundation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You're going to take soil away to give yourself an area to work. Depending on the site, you can store some of that material right on site. If it's okay material, you can bring it back later and have it be some of the backfill here. But for now, what you're going to do is you're going to figure out how much material are you going to take out to get down to not just 32 inches below grade, but then how much compact fill do you think we should put beneath our footings? I'm gonna just throw that out there. So you're gonna go down to soil, and then you're gonna put in some compacted fill. So that would be like crushed rock, smaller than that, but rock that is going to be compacted to give you a stable surface for drainage and also for the crawl space and then underneath your footing. So how deep would you make that? Any guesses? Chris B, have you ever been part of that part of a project?
I have kind of confusion here. I had an excavator guy say you dig down a glacial till, then you backfill. But then I had someone else I was talking to was saying glacial till is not the stuff you want to be on. So this is actually something I'm interested in, but I don't know the answer.
Glacial till is not a bad soil, but it's solid, but you definitely want to have fill on it because it will absorb water. I mean, it won't absorb water, so it's gonna force the water into the foundation. So you wanna have rock on the glacial till in order to minimize any wicking of moisture up into the footing.
That's why you have shot rock and then you put the gravel on top, right? So the shot rock kind of allows for drainage, even though it's still structurally sound.
Yep, exactly.
So I'd say 10 feet.
Oh, no. You know, I think that's a great guess. It totally is going to depend on the site, right? In Juneau, you would never have to go that far.
Here in
Maybe
Ketchikan,
Ketchikan, you might.
it is- yeah, it's settling's a big issue here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then go 10 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Estimate it that way. As long as you can rationalize what you're doing, then that's fine. For most sites in Juneau, you really don't end up going down that far, unless of course you're in North Douglas, and then we do have some clay to deal with. So Robert, what's your thought on that from a Juneau perspective? How deep would you go?
I mean, you go until you've got good, stable, compactable material as a base layer, and then, backfill D1 or something up to grade. I mean, in Juneau, I've never really had any problems with the soil as long as you're not in wetlands or something.
Yeah.
You
So
guys have
4 feet?
muskeg there?
What's that?
You guys have muskeg?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, you guys are in southeast still, but yeah, I think okay.
But I mean,
And that's
can't build a
definitely
muskeg really
where you
much.
get into problems. With muskeg, that is definitely a different animal. People sort of try to avoid building there.
I think here the general consensus is that if it's steep, it's going to be rock. It's a solid rock and solid, but it's going to be steep. But here, if it's flat, it's going to be muskeg.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, we have like the site that we're doing the houses on, and then also I'm working on the Glory Hall project. Those soils are sandy, silty, actually really good material. So they didn't have to dig down very far at all. We went about 4 feet and then brought up about 6 inches of shot rock. 6 inches of D1.
6. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm completely new at all this, so take what I say with a grain of salt. I could be wrong on anything I say about this.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there's nothing like learning from those who have built in the area. You definitely want to listen to the old timers because here in Juneau, the soil can be fantastic in one spot and just crap in another. And so it really does make sense to check that out thoroughly before you do your estimate. Because if you have to take out 10 feet of material, that's a lot of material. Where are you going to store it? That's a lot of time on your excavator. So
I don't think 10 feet is very uncommon here. We had the builder I was working with said he bought a lot and he dug down 10 feet and it was solid 10 feet because the guy backfilled.
yeah.
And they still had settling issues on that lot just because what was
my.
under it was not solid.
Huh.
So I think that's pretty standard here.
I don't know
Yeah.
if you guys know the story about our Walmart or not, but does
Yeah.
anybody know about Walmart?
No.
Yeah.
Well,
Go ahead and tell.
the piling, that the reason they can't sell that building is because they can't put the load in it that would be required. I think Lowe's and Home Depot and some other stores looked at it, but they couldn't load to the capacity that they wanted to load there because that slab is poured on piling that never hit bedrock. They drove piling for hundreds of feet and never hit bedrock over there.
Oh, geez.
And so they essentially just like poured caissons and drove piling into muskeg for hundreds of feet. So they just decided to put a whole bunch of them and then poured the slab over it. So
Yeah.
that Walmart's a thorn in everybody's side over there, I think.
Wow.
Yeah. It could take a residential load. That's about it.
Trying to illustrate,
Okay.
Juneau has soil problems too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about, there was a big subdivision on North Douglas, Blueberry Hills is what we call it. And the developer took, they put up a road and it's right up a hill. So it has switchbacks on it. So as they were creating the road, they just dumped everything that they were cutting off to the side, and they sold the lots as if they were compacted fill. And so people started, buying the lots and then finding out it was like stumps and logs and, stuff you can't build on. So it definitely makes sense to make sure you know what the soils are like. Well, to make this project a little bit easier and to get assignment 2 done, why don't we just make the assumption that we'll go down, let's go down 4 feet and put 6 inches of compacted fill in, okay? So that way we all have a target number. And then I'm going to let you think about how much room around the structure you have excavated in order to lay out your foundation, bring in the utilities, etc. Don't forget the porch. Okay. So when you're uploading, what you're going to do is kind of do kind of a sketch of your plan. So it is very simple. You're just basically drawing a box that shows the extent of your excavation and how many cubic yards of material you had to remove, and then how many cubic yards of compacted fill you're going to bring in. Is that pretty straightforward? So you should be able to get everything on just one 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So make sure you put your name on it. Well, it's going to go in your portfolio, so I'll know whose it is. But you'll have a little sketch, and you'll have a couple of mathematical equations that show how you figured out how many cubic yards of material you excavated, and then another equation on how much compacted fill you brought in. Are you good with that?
Sounds good.
So-
I thought for a moment maybe I got lost again, but you're
So
still with me?
we're using the foundation plan to figure out these numbers, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
And that was 4 foot excavation and 6 inches. Is that what you'd said?
Correct, yep. So that'll bring it back up to 3'6", which is more than enough depth for our 32-inch frost depth. All right, and so then the only other thing you need to do this week is read chapter 11, 12, and 13. And then answer the questions at the back of the book. So that would be discussion questions. Since we're using edition 2, it's a slightly different format than edition 1. And so, Robert, the book is available at the library now.
Okay, I will go and grab that. Thank you.
Cool. Yep. Our librarian was going to call you. I thought that was very nice.
Is that the Valley Library or downtown?
UAS.
Oh, gotcha.
Did you guys get your books yet?
Mine's in, but I'll be picking it up tomorrow at around noon.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yep, I got mine yesterday.
Yay. So unless there's any questions, I think that's probably enough for tonight. And there's a couple more presentations I was going to do tonight. One of them was just kind of an overview. It's not very meaty. And the other one is just a little bit more on foundations. So take a look at those. And next time we'll be talking more about estimating and contracts. So fun stuff ahead.
So
And
Robin,
also, yeah, go ahead, Kylie.
you said that the discussion topics, they're out of edition 2, yes?
Yep.
Okay, because that's the one that Chris will be getting tomorrow.
Yeah, and I had not received my book yet, so I was uploading the chapters from edition 1, and they have like 10 questions at the end of each chapter, but edition 2 just has like 5 discussion topics. So actually, maybe not even that many. Yeah. 4 for one of the chapters. Yeah, so I think we're all ready to move into edition 2. Except Robert, I think the book that's on reserve is edition 1. So I might have to do this backwards now. I might have to actually copy the discussions in the back of the book for you. The
Sorry.
chapters are the same, but the questions are different.
Oh, that's funny. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. That's a lot easier to copy one page than every page in the chapter. All right, any questions?
Any questions? Nope.
Okay, I really appreciate you guys hanging in there, and I'm sorry about the technology issues. I'm going to try to get that taken care of with our wonderful IT support. They might just say, Robin, we need to give you a new computer. Yours is dying. But I will see you all next week, and you're always welcome to email or join me in the office hours if you have any questions, especially if you're doing this for the very first time. You know, you might just not be sure about something, and I'm more than willing to help. So let me know what you need.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. See you next time.
Have a good weekend. Bye.
Thank you, Robin. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, okay. Take care.